My name is Kathleen Moore. It is Sunday, October 27th, 2024, and I'm 75, and this is my story. I was born in Newark, New Jersey in 1948, and my parents, Marguerite and John F. Chadwick. My father was a civil engineer and worked at Tungesol, and my father was the chief engineer and was responsible for building their manufacturing plants. He was a very interesting man, and he was a self-taught musician. He played a cello, a banjo, a mandolin. He hunted and fished. My father told Frank that he only had 4 bad habits: alcohol, tobacco, gambling, and women. I would say I was closest to my mother because my father was kind of difficult. And she was an artist. In fact, there's some of her artwork on that wall there. And she loved reading. We always had Time magazine and the New York Times in the house. And she was very funny. She wasn't really strict. She was very witty, very bright. I have one brother. His name was John Scott Chadwick. He is passed. Anyway, he was a year older than me, and I was very close to him, and he never wanted me hanging around with him. And so when we were little, he hung around, had a bunch of guy friends in the neighborhood, and they didn't mind me going with him when we would get bugs and sell them to the local, it was like a little science lab in town. But he never wanted me hanging around. But as we got older, that changed. And he liked to fish and hunt. He liked to shoot guns. He had a black belt in karate. He loved to read. He had a degree in history and psychology. My parents divorced when I was in the 3rd grade, and we lived with my grandmother on Lake Street in Newark until I was in the 10th grade, and my mother remarried a man named Richard, and it really wasn't a happy marriage. And I think that Richard was very jealous of my brother. And my brother was 6'2" or 3", black belt in karate, very angry young man. And I think that given a chance, he would have killed Richard. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. He hated him. Chad enlisted in the Vietnam War when he was 18, as far as I know, because he was going to be drafted anyway. He was out of high school, and it wasn't a good relationship between my brother and my mother's second husband. So it was like that was the best choice, to go to war in Vietnam or stay home in the family house with, in a very difficult situation. He was in the 101st Airborne, armed with all this equipment, and got shot at by the enemy, which was the Viet Cong, and they shot back. So he was just this kid that was with all these other kids all of a sudden in the jungle in a foreign land in the heat and the bugs and the malaria and, and seeing villagers get killed. I wrote him letters, and he would write back when he could. And unfortunately, I can't find those letters. But anyway, he was there for 2 tours of duty. My favorite memory from my childhood, we used to go to the ocean, to Asbury Park. When my parents were married, we stay in the Berkeley Carteret Hotel, which is a very nice hotel right on the beach. And my father did have a boat, and we go to Lake Hopatcong, which is in New Jersey, and we go swimming and go on. It was a small boat, like a little speedboat, and I would say that was my fondest memory, going to the ocean. When I was a child, I was extremely shy, and but I was a good student, and I was in Prospect Hill to the 10th grade, through the 10th grade. So I wasn't in any clubs, and I wasn't in any sports, because we didn't have a gym. We'd take a bus to the YMCA for gym. In the 11th grade, I got pregnant, so I didn't go to college until much later. I met John Mitchell when we still lived in Newark, and John Mitchell was my first husband's name. There was no other option for me, because I didn't want to go home and live with my mother. I didn't want to stay living with my mother, because I thought I had ruined everything, and I didn't want to make her life more difficult. My mother was horrified. She did not like John. She felt that he was controlling and violent. And Alice, of course, adored John and felt that marrying me was going to ruin his life, because he was in college. Alice wanted me to have the baby and give it away, and my mother said that we're not going to give any babies away, and that I could, go home and live with her and have the baby and raise it. And but John was hell-bent on getting married, so we got married. And Alice, who was an educator, said, "Oh, I didn't need to finish high school because I was married now, and why would I need an education?" And my mother said, "You are finishing high school." So I went to, I think it was 4 classes a night. I had so many credits from the private school that I just needed to take English and history, and then I had enough credits to graduate. So John would drive me to a high school in Newark, and most of the other, they were mostly all girls that had babies. The final exam, I forget what day it was, but after that day, I had Laura the next day. We went from Syracuse, New York to Rome, Georgia, which is about an hour west of Atlanta, and a very, of course, southern town where, it was very different than coming from a big city, going to this little podunk southern town. And that's when I got pregnant with Scott, and I wanted to go home to have the baby and have my mother help me with Laura was 4, 1 and 2, 2 and 3. They were 2 and 3 when we lived in Georgia. So we had agreed to that, and then when it came time to move to Michigan, I said, I'm going to go home. I'm going to start, I called the doctor, I made arrangements to go home. And John said I couldn't go. So that, we had a big fight about that. And I said, if you do this to me, I will leave you as soon as I can. And he said, go ahead. I said, so I did. So we moved to Michigan. Scott was born 2 weeks after we got here. And when he was a year old, I filed for divorce. Even though John Mitchell and I were divorced, Alice and I still maintained a relationship because I wanted her to be in my children's life, because she was a very smart woman and traveled the world, and she was very generous and a good influence. I had to have a variety of part-time jobs when my children were young, and I was going to school. I started going to, taking classes at Macomb Community College, and I took classes to become a court reporter. I got a job for a law firm because I could type, and I figured that would be a good job. And then I found out my mother was dying, so I didn't want. I couldn't do any more. I couldn't do any more school and try to deal with that. I found out she got sick in October. I think it was October 16th of 1974. My cousin Herbert took her to the emergency room because she had such pain in her leg, and she had cancer. She had colon cancer, and the doctor told me that she'd live a year and she wouldn't have any pain. She lived 3 months. My mother was 60 when she died. I was 25. So that year that my mother died, Mary was my best friend, and her husband worked for GE. So he was transferred back to Cleveland, and she came to my office at the law firm and said that she was leaving. And then John Mitchell transferred to California and with GE, and Doris went to live in Arizona, so like everybody left. While I was working for a law firm is when I found out there was a civil service test being given in Shelby Township, and the township paid sick days and vacation days, and there was a pension plan, and there was medical insurance. So it was just the perfect job. I have an associate's from Macomb in accounting, and then I transferred to Oakland University to finish. I have a Bachelor of Science with a major in accounting from Oakland. And I graduated in 91, I think. And then I took the CPA exam. My best and oldest friend is Mary Zook, and we met in 1970, and she was in Michigan because her husband worked for GE, and then they traveled all over the country, and they also went to Paris for almost 3 years. And so we've just stayed friends ever since. And she has one daughter, Gretchen, who lives in New York City. And let's see, I knew her parents, and she knew my mother and my father. So we go way back. Another dear friend is Frank Pericetti, and he had a restaurant across the street from the township. And he came into the township to apply for a liquor license, and I was in the clerk's office at the time. And I notarized his liquor license, although I didn't really know. I had just met him at the counter. And then we ran into each other at a gym that was not far from the township. And he invited me to the restaurant for lunch or something. So I went, and we just hit it off. We started dating, and he had a big family, or his parents were still living, and they had a farm in Romeo. And at every holiday, they would, it was like having a family again. And the first guy that my children ever met that they liked. And so we just, we dated for about 13 years. And I worked at the restaurant for a while. And I forget how long Laura and Sherry and Scott worked there. When I met Frank, the kids were probably 7, 10, and 11. And we were kind of, I wouldn't say that we were, bereft or alone, but Frank brought a whole community with him. Frank was like a father figure to my children. And his mother was the sweetest thing. And every holiday she just made great food, and there'd be 25 people at the house, and so it added quite a bit to our life. And Frank is very laid back, very accepting, very gentle, not judgmental, just a very positive influence. So we were together for 13 years. We continue to be friends to this day. Currently, I'm married to Dave Moore. We had our 28th anniversary last Sunday, and he worked at the township as the Parks, Rec, and Maintenance Director when I came there in 1977. And we became friends, and working friends. And Dave was married at the time with 4 children. And he and his wife divorced. So after that, he and I started dating, and we married in 1996. The day that Dave proposed to me, he was living in an apartment on the west side of Utica, and he was just about to, I think, give me a ring, and his daughter Karina was living with him. And Karina and her girlfriend, Sarah, came in the door just when, Dave was asking me to marry him. So it was very romantic. I think that we complement each other most of the time. I know that he would do anything for me. By some miracle, I was strong. And the strength that I showed getting, achieving an education and a good job, and also making sure that my children had an education, and as much stability as I could give them, which wasn't a lot, I'm very proud of. And I don't know how I did it. And if I did, I'd write a book and make $1 million. Yeah, I think that as much strength and skills as my children have, they also bear scars. And but everybody has scars, and you just have to tough it out. And I am very proud of them, and I would do anything for them. Laura was born in January of '66, and Sherry was born in May of '67, and Scott was born in July of 1970. My son's legal name is John Scott Mitchell, but I have always called him Scott because I didn't want to name him John. I wanted to name him Chad, but his father said no, he was going to be named John. So therefore, I've always called him Scott. Laura has 2 sons, Mitchell and Jacob. Sherry has a son and 2 daughters, Michael, Nicole, and Natalie. And Scott has a daughter, Caitlin. So the question is, why do my grandchildren call me Nana? I think it comes from Laura referring to me as Nanny or Nana. Some cool things I've done in my life. I've been in a hot air balloon twice. We used to go whitewater rafting when my children were little, and then Dave and I went rafting on the Colorado. I've been to Europe. I was in Paris and saw the Louvre. My favorite hobbies and activities are I'm taking pottery classes, taking just classes at, Cranbrook, which is a well-known kind of an art college, and in watercolor, and at CCS in Detroit, printmaking. There's some of the prints, like in the bathroom, there's 2 embossings that I did, and it just new techniques, new tools like clay. When you work in clay, you can it's 3-dimensional, and then you can also draw on it, so it's like a fine drawing, and it's also a 3-dimensional form. And it's just kind of fascinating to me that pottery has been a part of civilization, because you need a pot to be in and a window to throw it out of. So Dave and I did volunteer at the zoo, but I retired from that because walking is difficult. What other hobbies? The dog. I take care of a dog. It's a major activity for me. First dog already had the name Jake, and he was found on Gratiot and 16 Mile roaming the street, and the pound took him in, and his owner did come to, I guess, looking for the dog, and this young woman that worked there said that he didn't have any money to bail him out. He wasn't neutered or fixed, and you have to have the dog fixed. I mean, you have to pay for that. So he just abandoned him, but his name was Jake. And then the second dog we adopted from it was an adoption event in Pontiac, and his name was Jake. So when we got this guy, he and his brother were at the Humane Society, and they named him, they were 4 months old, and they named him Weeble and Wobble. And I wasn't gonna have a dog, and I don't know which one we got, but we just renamed him Jake, because you want a short name when you yell at them. The advice that I'd give to my younger self would be to avoid bad men, bad boys, bad men, and recognize it. I mean, people make the same mistake over and over and over again. And it's so important, the example that you give to your children, because that's what they will use to make judgments about their life. Last bit of advice is to live in the moment like llamas. And the reason that where I heard that first was Dave and I went to New Mexico, and we went for a hike in the mountains near Tawas with a man who had llamas. And the llamas came with us, and they can't poop and walk at the same time. I learned that. But the owner of the llamas said that to me, that animals live in the moment. They don't worry about the future, and they don't dwell on the past. It's real hard to do that, but it's my advice, right?